I think on a philosophical level, this comes down to how we define men and women, and especially women, because women have been oppressed for centuries because of our biological sex, and we have some really very new rights that we've only recently gained. And we're worried that this new definition of women, which will include some people who are male, will water those down. And, you know, like yesterday we saw the Scottish Government wouldn't even exclude convicted sex offenders from being able to get a GRC. And I think that, you know, when women are told that they are not even going to be able to claim really quite basic reassurance and protection, it's quite a frightening and dark day for women in Scotland.
Okay, Colin McFarlane, how do you react to that? This concern that even convicted sex offenders would be able to use this process, that women are being left unprotected?
So I think there's a few things on that. First of all, it's about what this process actually is and what it does and what it doesn't do. What this is about is demedicalising a really intrusive process to allow trans men and trans women to change their legal sex on their birth certificate and go through the process of obtaining a gender recognition certificate in a way that is more humane and less intrusive. On the issue there around sex offenders, this system will actually be one of the most safeguarded pieces of legislation around demedicalising legal gender recognition anywhere in the world.
Susan, does that mean
I would probably come back with I would probably come back with that the Gillian Martin amendment, which was voted through, relies on people who are some of the most, frankly, predatory and devious in society being honest with the police and with the registrar. So I don't think, you know, we know what lengths some of these people will go to. So it doesn't give reassurance.
What has been unfortunate around some of this debate in Scotland has been the conflation around predatory men and trans people. And that has been deeply unfortunate. There are 30 plus jurisdictions around the world that have similar systems to the one that's been proposed in Scotland. And there is no evidence to suggest that men have used this system, predatory men have used these systems. The UN Special Rapporteur for sexual orientation and gender identity has looked at these countries and made an intervention in this last week. And he also said there is no credible evidence.
You see, the one UN Special Rapporteur said that, but the other Special Rapporteur, who is looking at specifically at violence against women and girls, says something different. And we have seen evidence in other jurisdictions. I mean, there have been some pretty shocking examples in Canada and in the US. And even in Ireland, which is cited often, until a few years ago, there were no women in prison for sex offences. There are now 3, and they are all male.
Aren't you just focusing on extremes there, Susan?
Well, we always legislate on extremes. Safeguarding is based on extremes. We know most sexual violence is committed by the male sex, 98% of violent sexual crimes. And so that's one of the reasons we have safeguards in place. We don't legislate. We legislate to protect people at the extremes. You know, I'm sure Colin thinks this is extreme of us, but there are women in tears about this.
I don't.
Okay, come in, Colin, because there's some serious points there.
So yes, those are extremes. A lot of them are hypotheticals. But in the Parliament behind me last night, there were debates around safeguards. There are safeguards in this bill to give reassurance. Hopefully, I know Susan and I are not going to agree on this, but that's the reality. Those safeguards are now in that bill to prevent the hypotheticals.
Susan Smith, can I just put to you, we just heard from a young trans woman who talked to us about her experience of waiting years to obtain a gender recognition certificate. What would you say to someone like that?
I think fundamentally you can't change your sex. We know, you can't. That's physically, biologically not possible. I would also say that people's feelings are being elevated above the reality, the lived experience of women and our safety, our dignity, our privacy. And I would also say that some of this comes back to people saying they've been waiting years for things, because what they're actually waiting years for is to access services like counselling. And there's a huge problem with that. And we would be thoroughly supportive of any measure whereby trans people could access services better.
I think
Colin,
the question you asked there, Fatima, is crucial to this, because at the heart of this reform is trans people. the gender recognition reform bill will impact only on trans people. Again, I know Susan and I are going to disagree on that, but that's the reality of the situation. And many trans people tell us that they want to acquire a gender recognition certificate, but at the moment the process is so degrading, so medicalized, so inhumane that they don't want to go through that. And what that means is that their legal sex and their birth certificate is not aligned with other important documents like their driving license or their passport, and therefore they will be frightened that they might be outed in that situation.
A birth certificate is a historic record. I think there is something quite frightening about trying to divorce sex from bodies. I'm sure there are many people who are living in distress. I know there are many people who are living in distress about their bodies. I'm not sure giving them a piece of paper will change that.
It's quite clear you fundamentally disagree. We're not going to resolve the debate between you tonight, but thank you both very much for your perspectives.